好，今天是2021，应该是7月18号啊，大概是应该是第6堂啊。前面4堂是讲这个25种圆通，那上一次讲什么？我也忘记了，讲哪一个？是讲什么？没关系，这个你等一下你再来一个。
Today is we should count it as a 6th session of us discussing the Surangama Sutra. And the first 4 sessions, we have talked about the 25 perfections. And in last week's talk, we covered some of the aspects of characteristics of the true mind.
然后还有对，还有一个就是还有一个就是什么？就是应该讲说是什么见性，最主要是讲说为什么心在身体里面这样子。上一次。
And last week, mostly we discussed the question, why do we feel that our true mind is inside our body? It's an erroneous view.
今天其实要比较详细的讲啊，就是我们叫3系6处，其实是延伸啊上一次啊所讲的。上一次着重于为什么我们的心在身体里面，那叫妄心。那现在事实上是所有的现象是在身体里面，或者在心里面。那这个为什么会变成这样子？所以今天要讲这个部分。
So the focus of today's talk is going to be on the 3 subtle aspects or 3 subtle marks and the 6 coarse marks. So this is actually a continuation from last week's discussion, which focused on the erroneous view that our mind is inside the body. The truth of the matter is the mind actually encompasses and contains all phenomena, including our body. So the body should be inside the mind. But why is that we have this erroneous feeling, this view that our mind is inside the body? So today's discussion, the 3 subtle marks and the 6 coarse marks will address this question.
那一个今天要讲的东西叫3系6处啊。那楞严经并没有讲到就是什么3系6处。楞严经的分类是什么？是无明能所虚空世界众生业果。
So today we're focusing on the 3 subtle marks and the 6 coarse marks. Actually, in the Surangama Sutra, the sutra itself does not discuss these aspects, these marks specifically. The focus of Surangama Sutra is on the rise of delusion, leading to the world and sentient beings and karma. That's the focus of Surangama Sutra.
那个就是大乘起信论就把它分成3系6处啊。
And this discussion, explanation of 3 subtle marks and 6 coarse marks actually came from the awakening of faith in Mahayana.
那我们今天是围绕着无明能所这个3系啊。那这个3系就是说细到我们一般人不会觉得它是烦恼。
So today's talk is going to focus on ignorance, delusion, the duality of the mind, subject and object, and the 3 subtle marks. And these 3 subtle marks are so subtle that usually we ordinary people, we cannot perceive it even.
这个3系其实在我们就是每个当下，就从生到死，死在生，那基本上都是围绕了这一个细到你不觉得是烦恼这样的一个模式在运作。
The 3 subtle marks. Actually, every moment of our life, and going through the cycles from birth to death and then to birth again. Any moment, we are operating under the conditions of these three subtle marks without even knowing it.
那我常常讲说，譬如说我在讲，你们在听啊，那么一般人不会觉得是什么，这个是无明，有人觉得是什么？我就是我听，我要听不听的，或是不恭敬的听，那叫做烦恼。可是我很恭敬的听，我们一般人不会觉得这是无明啊。
So an example I often talk about is this very fact right now. I am talking and you are listening. This very phenomenon, usually we don't perceive it as afflictions or as vexations. We don't see that as being problematic. And this is actually a delusion. Usually what we will perceive as affliction is if you are deciding that you're not going to listen to the talk anymore, or if you're listening to the talk with a disrespectful mindset, that we spot that and say, oh, that is vexation. But the very fact that there's this view that there's a speaker and there's a listener, that's already problematic.
那这一个我刚才讲说，我们应该就是处处都是有，比如说我们一般讲说有能知的我或能知的心所知的外境，我们基本上一般人应该是你包括你在入定也是一样，有能知的心所知的外境。那这一个我们认为就是本来就如此的。
The way we operate is that any given moment in time and any place, we are operating with the view that there's a subjective me, the self, or sometimes we call it the mind. And then there are all these objective, these objects that's to be perceived, the external phenomenon that is being perceived by the mind.
那有三系，那接下来就有后面的六出啊。六出，如果三系六出，大概可以对照，就是什么？一个是就是水路的那一种，一开始就讲这个什么华性沾染周沙界啊，甚深无量劫眼前，自从一念誓言明，8万尘劳即作毕。就是说整个水路一开始就是说，就讲这句话，就是说我们基本上我们会承认生死就是什么，就是顶上就三系的关系，就是一念誓言明，失去了你这个本来的什么，就是心性，就是不动或是没有能手的心性，然后就开始有这些什么后续的什么六出，
So starting from the three subtle marks, then it branches off and gives rise to the 6 coarse marks. And the 3 subtle marks and 6 coarse marks actually correspond with several different sutra or ceremonies, one of which is the water and land Dharma service. And in there, the text there's this verse inside the text that says, Dharma nature illuminates throughout sand-like realms, profound and boundless beyond words. In a single thought, the original illuminating nature is lost, henceforth obscured by 8,000 afflictions. And this verse basically explains the reason why we are stuck in this cycle of life, birth and death. And that is all because our original illuminating nature is lost when delusion arises.
然后在37念就也是一开头都是先把这个关键性的三系六出把它点出来，叫做觉海虚空起，那娑婆黑浪流，就是说我们的觉海，是没有东西的，那一旦有虚空，那你就在娑婆世界就是造业流浪。
Similarly, in the ritual of mindfulness in 3 sessions, there's also this part of the text that contains this verse that says, "From the ocean of awareness arises empty space. Waves of samsaric karma flow forth." So the ocean of our awareness, originally, it does not there isn't any particular object or phenomenon in this ocean. But once we lost this luminosity, then it gives rise to all these waves and of vexation and karma.
然后这个是大悲忏啊，现前一心皆有神力啊，无始暗动，障止尽明。那平等法中起自他想啊，也就是什么？所以讲这个三系啊。
Moving on to the Great Compassion Repentance Ceremony, there's also this verse inside the text that says, "The present mind contains wondrous capacity. From time without beginning, the rise of dark agitation obscured this quiescent luminosity, giving rise to the notion of self and others amidst of universal equality." And again, this explains the rise of the 3 subtle marks.
这个3个，你们看到这3个啊，第一个法性啊，用法性；那第2个是觉海；那第3个现前一心啊，这是同样的东西啊。那只是他们后面在描述啊，他有哪一些，比如说第一个法性，他作遍杀戒，然后超越语言，就是不可思议啊。那是第一个。
Looking at these 3 verses, there are these terms, Dharma nature, or the ocean of awareness, and the third one is the present mind. These 3 terms are all referring to the same thing. They sort of touch upon different characteristics of the mind. For instance, Dharma nature is all-encompassing. It encompasses all these sand-like realms, and it transcends. It's so profound and boundless, it transcends words.
那你法性它是它作遍就是法界，然后这个第2个是觉海，觉性跟法性是一样的，它像海一样，对吗？那第3个现前一心，自然也是觉海，有神力，有无穷尽的功能，那都在讲同个东西。那我们这边，然后那一个楞严经是讲觉性，或是讲什么？讲真心，同样的东西。
And the second verse also talk about the Dharma nature, but it calls it ocean, the ocean of awareness, and it's addressing the aspect that it's vast, like the ocean. And that is also the same as the present mind, whereas the present mind contains wondrous capacities. This is referring to the functions of the mind. So these terms are all pointing to the same thing, our mind, the true mind. In the Surangama Sutra, it talks about awareness, the nature of awareness, or the true mind. Those are the terms that come up in the Surangama Sutra.
好，那这一个什么法性的觉海呀，现前一心，就是我们现在我正在讲话那个心，这个是大家都有的哈。你正在讲话，你正在听，你正在什么？正在听的不想听，或是听得很棒，那都可以在这里面呢。你只有生力嘛，你听得很棒，那听得不想听，你要干什么，都是就是这个心也是这个心也是大像觉海，那它是法性，它超越语言。
So whether it's the Dharma nature, the ocean of awareness, or the present mind, it's all referring to the same thing. I'm talking right now. I'm using this mind to do the talking. And in fact, everybody has it. You're using it to do the listening right now. And whether you decide to not listen to the talk, or you feel that, oh, this talk is so wonderful, I want to keep hearing it, whatever that you want to do, your mind is capable of doing it. And these are all the capacity of our mind, and exhibits the characteristics of being great like the ocean, and it has all these wondrous functions that it can perform.
然后接下来他们三个就自从一念思言明他讲说思言明就等于是起无明或者说不觉。那第二个是什么？因为不觉所以有虚空起。那第三个是什么？暗动，然后平等法中起自他相，都完全是同样的东西，只是不同的什么？不同的讲法
And then what happened to this true mind? So, for instance, in the first verse that we cited, a single thought from the original illuminating nature of a single thought is lost. It's referring to the beginning of our delusions. And later on in the other two verses, for instance, in the third one, from time without beginning, the rise of dark agitation obscured this quiescent luminosity, giving rise to a notion of self and others. These are all tied together with the three subtle marks, the beginning of our deluded mind.
很棒的地方，虽然我们说我们在流浪生死嘛可是呢，我们每个当下其实我们从来都没有在流浪生死就很棒的地方就是就是像那个谁讲说什么一灯能灭千年暗就是说其实我们每个当下都在这种觉悟的状态
Even though we are saying or we feel that we are wandering around aimlessly, going through cycles of life and death, what is actually amazing and is that we're actually never lost, and we are actually never really wandering aimlessly. There's a saying by a great master that one light can illuminate the darkness that has persisted for eons, thousands of years. This one single light can illuminate eons of darkness. So even if we feel that we're lost, our ability to be aware, our mind has never been lost.
好，那我们来看看就是说我们的心一直处在这种觉悟的状态那为什么我们现在不感觉的，我们不感觉有觉悟嘛，对不对那么看看说到底什么我们变成这个样子那又怎么说我是一直在觉悟的状态我们看今天能不能让你了解
Even though our mind is constantly in a state of enlightenment, that's not how we feel. We don't feel that's the case. We feel that we are deluded and we are not enlightened. So today we hope to dispel your doubts and explain why is it the mind is actually in the state of enlightenment already. We'll try to explain this and hopefully it will help you gain some understanding.
那六出我们刚才说三系以后就有六出楞严经是虚空世界众生业果然后那一个大乘起论是什么自相相续相执着相记名子相造业相就是什么受果报相嘛
So from the three subtle marks comes the six coarse marks. In the Surangama Sutra, the terms, the way it's explained is from this dark emptiness comes the world and sentient beings and karma, whereas in the awakening of faith in Mahayana, it's explained via these terms: marks of discriminating knowledge, marks of continuity, mark of attachment, mark of defining names, mark of producing karma, and mark of the effect produced by karma.
这个我们在下次可能再讲那我们先来讲一下为什么就是什么我们本来就是一直就其实我们随时随地都在一种觉悟的状态跟我们的心跟佛的心完全一样但是我们不觉得那我们来看它是怎么变成我们叫从真起妄或者说就是什么就是三系六出的三系我们来看一看
we'll probably talk about the 6 course marks next time. Today, we're going to try to explain why is that we are originally already in the state of enlightenment, that our mind is the same as the Buddha's mind, yet we don't feel that. That is not how we see it, or that's not the way we understand it. And the reason why we don't feel we're enlightened is because delusion arises from the true mind. And we're going to try to explain how this came about. And mostly this is related to the 3 subtle marks.
这个三系六出也可以跟摄因眼对照那就我们真心妄动，然后没有能所，然后产生有能所无明那就后面的实际上就是都可以对照的
The 3 subtle marks and 6 coarse marks can correspond with another concept, the 12 dependent origination. And start by explaining by saying the agitation of the true mind giving rise to non-duality, further giving rise to delusion, so on and so forth.
所以我们现在来看《楞严经》，就是说这一个三系是怎么形成的那我们就直接看《楞严经》了这一个《楞严经》是讲就是什么？应该在讲是什么？是从《楞严经》从见一到这边应该是见4的样子，应该是见4的样子，还是见？对，应该是见4那见1是讲说，你的心在哪里，对不对？那阿难讲说心在里面嘛。那接下来佛陀讲说心不是在里面，对不对接下来就讲心有10种特质，然后接下来是心见3，大概讲心跟什么？跟6，我们叫6层、6根，还有6识，还有7大，还有五阴的关系那接下来才讲到这个
So, relating Surangama Sutra to the 3 subtle marks and 6 coarse marks, we're now bringing it back to the Surangama Sutra and talk about how did the 3 subtle marks came about and leading to our delusions. And this is coming from the 4th chapter, I think, of the sutra. A really quick review. In chapter 1, the Surangama Sutra discusses where's the mind, and let us answer a succession of questions from the Buddha, saying the mind is inside, and the Buddha refuted it, saying the mind is not inside. So that is chapter 1. And in chapter 2, the sutra discussed the 10 characteristics of the mind. And in chapter 3, it talks about the 6 sensory objects and 6 sensory organs and the 7 elements and also the 5 skandhas, their relationship with each other. So those are the 3 previous chapters. And now we are moving on to chapter 4.
然后这个就是见4的时候是富罗那就问佛陀，就是说我们的真心，我们的觉性本来没有东西，那为什么产生山河大地就等于是我们说这个众生是怎么形成的，世界是怎么形成的，那业造业是怎么形成的
So chapter 4 begins by one of Buddha's disciple, Purna, asking the Buddha, the mind originally does not have, there isn't any object, any one thing in the mind. How did the mind give rise, manifest the mountains and river and the earth? Basically, it's a question of how did the mind manifest sentient beings, the world, and karma? How did all these came about?
所以接下来佛陀就开始讲说我们的觉性前面性 性节妙明哈，性节妙明，本节明妙，这里面是一个很关键的啊。那汝称节明，维护性明，称名为节，为节不明，称为明节。
And then it follows by the Buddha's explanation, and the text goes like this. Suppose, as you say, that for our inherent enlightenment to be characterized by understanding, that understanding must be added to it when enlightenment is realized. But an enlightenment to which an understanding is added cannot be a true enlightenment. So on and so forth. It's on the slide.
稍微下来讲一下，性节妙明，本节明妙啊。性节就是说我们的觉性啊，也就是什么？我们当下这颗心啊，你们现在正在听的这颗心啊，它就是觉性啊。那它有觉，然后这边楞严经会用明啊，明就是什么？就是有时候有些人叫做知啊。那明，比如说你的心有能够照明，比如你能够看到能够明色相，我们叫做看啊。那你心能够明声音，那叫听。那你的心能够明味道，那叫做嗅。那你的心能够明这个什么？那还是香臭，就是味道嘛。那能够明酸甜苦辣，也叫做味道啊。然后你的心能够明你的酸痛痒麻，其实我们是感觉啊。还有你的心可以明你记忆中的画面，然后记忆中的一些等于是梦境啊。或你能够想，你能够想到那个叫做，那也叫做明。那一般我们用一般的名字叫做见闻觉知，那就是我们这个性有明的功能，可是它是无量无边的明，所以叫它很妙明啊。
So our mind, this true nature of ours, it's it's your present mind, the mind that you're using to do whatever right now. It has the ability to be aware, to illuminate. So kind of synonymously, the awareness can be, you can also call it illuminate. It has the ability to illuminate, or another word is to know. These words, these translations all has its limitations, but awareness in here can be synonymous to illuminate and knowing. So your mind, your true mind, has the ability to illuminate. So when it illuminates physical forms, we call it seeing, to see. When it illuminates sounds, we call it to hear, hearing. When it illuminates taste, we call it tasting. And when it illuminates scent, we call it smelling. Similarly, when it illuminates tactile sensations, we call it tactile feeling. And then it further has the ability to illuminate your memories or your dreams or your thoughts. That's also the functions of your mind, that it can illuminate your thoughts and mental activities. In short, we call all these, there's a term in Chinese, we call it to see, to hear, and to feel and to know. And the mind has these wondrous functions to illuminate all phenomena. And what's even more amazing of our true mind is that this illuminating is boundless, without limit. It doesn't focus on any one thing particular. It's unlimited, boundless.
那后面那个本觉啊，其实本觉跟性觉是同样的东西，可是本觉通常我们也针对本觉会有一个叫不觉，还有死觉啊，在好像是是不是唯识还是大乘起信论的，就是本觉还有什么这个不觉还有死觉啊。
And the next part of this phrase talks about original awareness. It's your nature has the ability to be aware, to know, to illuminate. Pairing together with this original awareness is these two other terms. One is no awareness, no knowing, not illuminating. And then the third term is the start, the initial or beginning of awareness. These three related terms, I think they come from the conscious only school, and it's also touched upon in the awakening of faith in Mahayana commentary.
那一个不觉就是我们现在是不觉嘛，因为我们有能手就是不觉哈，反正是有能手就是无明就是不觉哈。那不觉，那有一天你听到这一个名称，然后修行以后，然后你就觉悟了，那觉悟到你的本觉，我们就是觉悟以后就开始叫做始觉。那始觉的时候，你就是什么？你本来就是觉的，那叫本觉啊。你从不觉变成觉悟，我们叫做始觉啊。那你实际上你不管你觉不觉，你本来都是觉悟的。
So right now, because we're operating with subject and object, with this diluted view of that there's duality. So currently we're in the state of not enlightened, not aware, not fully enlightened. And then one day you hear these talks or these teachings about non-duality, and you become enlightened and start to practice that way, then it's the beginning of your enlightenment, beginning of you realizing your true mind. So that's the second term. Whereas in fact, at all time, whether you feel you're enlightened or not enlightened, we are using our true mind to operate and to function in this world at any given point in time. And we call that the original or fundamental awareness.
然后就是接下来他就汝称觉明啊，就是你称这个就是我们的觉性啊，它能够觉啊，能够明，那到底是我们这个觉性本身它本质就能够明呢？所以称它为觉，还是说我们这个觉性本身是没有感知、没有明的功能，那称为明觉啊。这个明觉可能可以再解释啊。
And moving on to the text, it says that for our inherent enlightenment to be characterized by understanding, so you say, that understanding must be added to it when enlightenment is realized. But an enlightenment to which an understanding is added cannot be a true enlightenment. Such an enlightenment would indeed lack understanding if understanding were not added. So basically it's this going back and forth is about whether the true mind originally has ability to illuminate and to be aware.
好，那你来看到哈，那这个就说我们的觉性哦，现在我们的心性哦，就是不是说从头到尾了啊，尽未来际，我们这一个有时候我们又叫到什么？积而常照，照而常积哦。这个心就是那个照，就相当于这边的明哦，就是他们是用照，那这边楞严经比较喜欢用明哦。那这个是什么？永远的哦，这一个能够觉知的这个功能，它尽未来际的哦，那是永远是这样的状态。我们有时叫如真如或是如来，就是这样子。
So our nature of awareness, in time without beginning, and also in timeless into the future without any boundary, it's always quiescent and always illuminating. You probably have heard this term, this phrase that we often use, that it knows without perceiving things, and it illuminates without cognizing object. And in Surangama Sutra, our true nature, the term that is often used in the sutra is illuminating. And this is all, whether we're using the word knowing or using the word perceiving, or in the sutra, illuminating, these are all referring to the function of our mind, that it has the ability to illuminate, and it extends all the way into the future without limit. So again, another phrase, another term to describe our true mind is true suchness.
所以这一个就是说我们的觉性就是反正佛陀就问富罗那，就是说我们这个觉性，我们这个能觉知的那个觉性，它是本来就能够具有觉知，然后或是明的功能，还是它本身是没有觉知、没有明的功能？那就是所以你要去感知一个东西就有点也是什么，就是说我们的灯没办法照，我们要去用个东西来照个东西，那我们才能够感知那就是等于是第二句是我们这个觉性是没办法感知的，所以称为就是说你要去明一个对象，要用灯来照明，我们才能够，就有点像是什么？如果我们用一般来讲说晚上就黑暗的时候，我们看不清楚，那我必须要用灯去照，那我们就可以看清楚，那是不是这样子
So to explain the nature of our enlightened awareness, the Buddha asked Purna in the sutra, is it the case that our true nature originally already exhibit the function of awareness and knowing and illuminating? Is it the case? Or is it the other case where our original nature is not originally capable of knowing and awareness, because that function is not originally there, so that we are dependent on having an object to give rise to the function of awareness. That there needs to be an object to be illuminated so that the function of illuminating can arise. So similarly, like in the nighttime, when it's dark and we cannot see, we need to use a light and to light up the room so that now we can see. So is the first scenario true, where the function is originally part of our nature? Or it's the latter, that we're dependent on object and subject to have the function of awareness and illuminating?
可以讲是说，假设我们的眼睛瞎掉，我们的耳朵也聋了，然后鼻子也没有什么嗅觉，乃至于你身体中风了，乃至于你昏迷了，那我们那个觉性都不会消失了。这边在讲这个部分。
Another way to understand this is, let's say, if we become blind one day and then we become deaf, we can no longer smell things. Furthermore, we enter a coma altogether. In those kind of states where we cannot see, cannot hear, cannot smell, cannot feel, our original nature, this nature of awareness, does not disappear. It's always there.
所以像我们有一些人我们就最近的没法是弥留嘛，你弥留对我们来讲，我们感觉他什么？他就是一个尸体在那边，那你也不感觉，就是不感觉他那个心性，其实他心性那个信息并没有消失，就是我们习惯是什么？透过眼睛、耳朵、鼻子这些这种感官来感知的，其实它不需要的。那当你被这一些什么，被这些身体的感官限制住了以后，你好像就觉得它是什么？ 他是那个我们有时候叫做就死了，因为他不能动了。其实他那个心性并不会死啊。
Recently, a member of the Sangha was at the end of her life, and she was in that state. And for us, the observer, it may appear that it's almost like a corpse laying there. It doesn't have the ability to be aware of its surroundings. The truth of the matter is, the true mind has never disappeared. It's always there. But from day to day, we, as of now, we rely on our sensory organs, the eyes and ears, the nose, to perceive phenomena, to perceive objects around us. So we rely on that to give us the sense that we are alive. There's actually no need for these sensory organs. Because of our over-reliance on these sensory organs, we are bound by them. We're limited, constrained by the organs. Whereas the true mind does not rely on the sensory organs. It's always there, has always been there. The true mind will not perish, does not die with the physical body.
那这一个当然，这当中是呼罗那当然是什么？如果不明的话，那就不应该有名节啊。我现在这个不管了，我们就接下来就讲说，有所非觉，无所非明啊。那无明又非觉瞻明性，若无所明，则无明觉啊。就讲这一句啊。
So moving onward with the text. Moving on to the text, but an enlightenment to which an understanding is added cannot be a true enlightenment. Such an enlightenment would indeed lack understanding if understanding were not added. But an enlightenment that lacks understanding cannot be true intrinsic enlightenment that is inherently pure and endowed without understanding. And furthermore, it further goes on to a discussion of whether awareness depends on object and subject. 这边英文应该没有很完整. The English text here may not be complete. So the focus of Fashi's next part of talk is going to be on this notion of awareness and its relationship with subject and object. Hello, Fashi.
好，那这边有所非觉啊，就是等于是有对象的啊，就是我们的觉性啊，它是没有对象的啊，所以有所，你只要有对象，就不是那些没有能所的觉性啊。这第一个有对象的，就不是没有能所的觉性啊。
And over here, we're going to talk about the true mind. The true mind actually does not depend on, it's non-dualistic. It does not depend on there is and subject of perceiving and the object of being perceived. So the mind without duality, without subjectivity and objectivity, using that as an anchor, we can know that whenever you feel there's a subject and an object of perceiving, that cannot be the true mind.
那无所非明，就是刚刚前面是说你有对象，就是应该是有能所的所，就不是没能所的觉性啊。因为我们觉性超越能所嘛。后面这一句是什么？你有所，就是没有所的话，那也不是那个明也不是觉性本身。那这些我们再解释一下。
So the first phrase talks about the true mind does not depend on duality of subject and object. But the second part of the phrase talks about without an object, it's not the true mind either. It's not so it's not the true mind either. So and we're going to talk about this a little bit more.
这边大概可以用那个什么来解释呢？用那一种镜子跟什么跟影像哦。那我们的觉性像镜子一样啊。那你若是有对象的知，并不是觉性本身，可是我们的镜子本身还是可以什么觉知里面的影像，它是没有对象的知，所以它无所。就是说，如果不能觉知，那它也不是觉性本身。反正就是什么，它既不是有能所的觉知，但是它还是可以觉知的啊。所以这个无所就是说你没办法去明，那表示什么？表示它也不是觉性本身啊。所以一个是有对象的，就是针对什么？它本来没有能所，你现在变成有对象的，就变成什么？就不是无能所的觉性。那第二个就是说，它虽然没有能所，可是它还是有感知功能的，那就无所不能感知的话，那也不是觉性本身。
So we can use the analogy of mirror and its reflection. Our true nature can be likened a mirror, that it has the ability to reflect any sort of images, objects. Yet it's not confined or limited to any particular subject and object. So the true mind, the perceiving things with any specific subject and object cannot be the true mind. This is referring to the first part of the phrase. At the same time, without the capacity of perceiving and aware, if that ability is lost, that is not the true mind either. So the true mind can illuminate and it can perceive. That is a characteristic of the mind, without which there's no true mind either.
好，那无明又会结沾明性。我们的心性本来就是能够，就是具有明，只是它没有能所的明。那这个无明，你也可以讲说它没有明的功能，或者它是有能所的明啊。所以有能所的明，绝对不是那种无能所的那个觉性啊。所以无明就也不是结沾明性，我们这个心性就对了。
Without the function of illuminating is not the true mind either. So the true mind must exhibit a function of illuminating and perceiving. At the same time, it illuminates without subject and object. So the true mind must exhibit the function of illuminating and also must be without the confinement of subject and object.
所以后面那一句就是说，若无所明，则无明觉。你说是没办法明，你没办法感知，那就是什么？就表示你这个没有感知能力了。
And the last part of this verse is that without the ability to perceive, to be aware, and to illuminate is not the true mind either.
那这个整段来讲，可以讲说，我们的心性一直处在一种我们叫极而常照，照而常寂的状态，就一直在明的状态，见未来际啊。然后现在是我们的经验是我有能知跟所知啊，那这也是没有能所的觉性，那我们经验上是有能所的，那主要是要讲这个部分了，它是怎么样产生的啊？那我们这边可以讲说，我们认为我必须要去感知一个对象，我才有感知功能，那就这样子就产生什么？就产生无明，就是我们叫什么？叫做不觉啊。
So to summarize the entire verse is that our true mind is constantly always in the state of illuminating, that it has its ability to perceive and to illuminate. And this function extends, it's not bounded by time, it extends all the way to the past into inexhaustible future. That is a true state of our mind. But right now, based on our experience and based on our present mindset, we are using the true mind under the condition of subject and object. Whereas in reality, should be no subject and object. And why is that? And that is because we feel that I must illuminate something to give rise to the function of illuminating, that there must be an object for me to perceive. And when we have this delusion, then that is the state of deluded mind or ignorant mind or non-enlightened mind.
我们就来看下面一个就是信结必明，妄为明结，结为所明，因明立所，所即妄立，生汝妄能。
Moving on to the next verse. If you think that an understanding must be added to your inherent enlightenment, you are falsifying the true understanding, the true enlightenment. That is, nothing needs to be added to true enlightenment. But once an understanding is added, nevertheless, that understanding must understand something. Once the category of something understood is mistakenly established in the mind, the category that which understands is mistakenly established as well.
这边就讲说，我们的觉性本来是没有能手的柄，那你以为我要去明一个对象来证明我有明的功能，就这样子就是一念不觉。那你被你所明的有能手的名，并不是无能手的觉性。
So this verse is basically explaining our true nature does not rely on subject and object to illuminate, but our delusion came from this one thought that there must be an object for me to illuminate, to exhibit the function of illuminating. This is a deluded thought. And from there, subject duality arises and we enter the state of non-enlightenment.
那一旦我们有一个被我们感知、被我们明的对象，我们就是因为你明，所以变成是我所明。那有所明的话，既然你那个所明一定变成有一个能明，所以变成能所就跑出来了。
Once you feel that there must be an object to illuminate, so the object arises, and there's an object that's perceiving your illuminating. And because the object arises, then there must be the dualistic stand of having a subject that is doing the seeing, doing the illuminating. And this gives rise to duality of the mind, the notion of subject and object.
那我们现在有能手那我们也不觉得有能手有什么不对劲那么一旦像我们自己，我们实际上的经验就是只要打坐身体不见了，大家就害怕，要赶快拔什么，因为你身体不见了，你能知的心没有消失，大家很害怕，要赶快把身体找出来那这个是常见的，就是我们一直想要抓一个有一个对，比如说我一个被我身体感知的那个感觉来证明我活着。那一旦这些感觉消失，那我们的90%的人都要想要把身体找出来证明我活着
Operating with subjectivity and objectivity, that's our usual state, and we don't see it as being problematic. And that is why oftentimes during meditation retreat, we often see people when they are sitting very well and they experience that they lose touch with their physical body. 90% of the time, people become fearful. They immediately start looking for their body. And this goes to illustrate that we depend so much on our physical sensations, our senses, to give us confirmation that we are alive. And once we lose touch with these senses, we may become fearful that that we no longer exist. And that is why 90% of the practitioners I've seen is that they, instead of dwelling in that state, they immediately try to look for their body.
很奇怪哦，就是说我们打坐的时候身体不见了很害怕，可是晚上睡觉就要让身体不见才能够，就想办法让身体不见才睡着啊，就蛮好玩的。
The irony is, when we're in meditation, when we don't feel our body anymore, many people become very scared. Whereas when we're sleeping every night, we enter the state of sleep. The prerequisite is that we lose touch with our physical body. And yet in that kind of situation, people are not fearful. I find that kind of funny and ironic.
事实上就是说你每天睡觉世界不见了，对不对？那你第二天起来没有保证你这个你熟悉的世界会再出现的，没有保证的。
So when we fall asleep every night and we lose touch with our sensory stimuli, senses, the world has fallen away. And there's actually no guarantee the very next morning when we wake up, we will indeed be in a world that we are familiar with. There's no guarantee for that.
所以说有人就说睡觉叫做小死啊，那你在第二天没醒来就是大死啊。
So some people call sleeping, falling asleep, a little death. And if you fall asleep and don't wake up the next morning, then that's a big death.
好，那我们接下来因为已经有能手以后，接下来就无同义中自然成义啊，义彼所义，因义利同，同义花明，因此互利，无同无异啊。
And once the duality of subject and object is formed, moving on to the next verse, it reads, at first, there's neither sameness nor differentiation, but then that which is differentiated is clearly distinguished. That which differs from what differentiated is distinguished as being uniform. Because the category of what is differentiated and the category of what is uniform have been established. The category of what is neither uniform nor differentiated is further established.
那这边在讲什么呢？就是说，就是能跟手，其实上是没有能跟手的啊。就是比如说你们第一练听我的啊，听我这是第一练，那第二练变成能听，对不对？那这边我们就觉得是什么？有能听跟手听，或者能看跟手看，其实他们是没有，它是什么？是前后练的关系啊。
So what is this verse really talking about? It's talking about that we feel there's a need for subject and object, but in reality, there's no subject and object. Right now, you're listening to the talk. You feel there's me doing the listening. There's an object of being heard and me that is doing the hearing. Where actually there's no this subjectivity and objectivity. All there is a succession of thoughts. The first thought followed by the second thought, so on and so forth.
这边我其实比较喜欢用那种跟自己下棋的老人有一部影片跟自己下棋的老人那个老人走到对方的位置回步的时候，他自己这一地方就没人，那他从那对方的位置走回来的时候，对方的位置就没人。可是那个这个影片就把它弄成两个人，其实永远是一个人，永远所以没有什么同义啊。
I like to use the analogy of the old man playing chess with himself. So when the old man moves to the opposite side to make a move, the original position, that person is already gone. It has moved on to the next position. But in the clip, in the film, it feels like that in that original position, the person still exists. And when he walks to the opposite side, made a move and come back to the original position, in the reality is in the opposite side, the person is already gone. But again, our experience or in the movie, it looks like that the other side, there's still a person there. Actually, there has always just been one person. There has never been two. And that is why we said that it's not one and not two. There's no differentiation between the two.
可以讲说，其实从来没有能所。但是我们的经验上其实是有所看，有能看跟所看，因为你不觉得前一念消失了，所以变成能看跟所看，所以说没有同一当中，就变成什么能看跟所看。
Has never been an actual subject and object, but we feel there's a subject of seeing, the object of being seen. We don't feel that our experience doesn't tell us that there has never been two. There's always one. And it's the relationship actually is in the stream of first and second thought.
好，那我们现在就是说，就是什么能跟所其实是同一个东西啊，但是我们现在就觉得有能跟所啊。现在再来讲异比所异啊，就是我们所看到的啊，就是有什么有同跟异啊。譬如说，我们现在被我们看到的啊，有像我这边有电风扇呢，有地板呢，那就是什么？这个是异的啊。那在异的这个有东西拿掉的话，就是空，就是同啊。就是说我们看到这些东西的话，有不同的什么电风扇什么什么的，另外一个同的就是虚空啊。所以就是异的是各种现象啊，那同的就是虚空或是临近啊。
Okay, so there's no subject and object. It has always been one and the same. It's neither this. There's no differentiation between the two. The next part is talking about how it became differentiated. For instance, right now, I can see in front of me, I see the floor and I see the fan. And then there's also the space. In this experience, the floor and the fan are differentiated objects, whereas the space surrounding me and surrounding the floor and the fan is nothingness. So we call that space, and it's uniform. So differentiated is referring to all the perceived objects, and what is considered uniform is the space or stillness. Those are considered as uniform.
这边就是同意啊，是针对被我感知的对象，被我明的对象，同的叫虚空，那异的叫做什么色相啊，各种不同的色相啊，所以就是什么因色相的不同而立一个同就是虚空。
老师，最后一句请你再说一次。
就是因异立同，就是什么？
因异立，
就是说这些什么各种不同的东西，它是不一样嘛。那在跟这些不同的东西的背景就是虚空嘛，所以虚空是同嘛。跟这些什么，跟这些异跟同，反正就是什么，就是有不同造型的色相，那叫异嘛。那虚空是哪里都是同的，所以因异立同，就是异的，就是有色相以外的话，它就是同嘛。
So of all the phenomenon that is perceived by my mind, we then distinguish them into what is different and what is uniform. And our categorization of different and uniform is based on what is different. So again, the fan and the floor, we see those as different objects. And in contrast, using those objects as an anchor point, then what is in the background, the empty space that's around these objects, we perceive that as uniform.
然后对我们感知的对象有同是虚空，那意是各种色相，对不对？另外又一个东西就能够知道同跟异的，这就是我们叫有情啊，就是被感知的是等于是我们叫做就是无知无觉的物，那能感知这些相同的或者不同的相同的虚空、不同的色相的，它会同也会异，那就是有情啊，就是等于是原来我们一般叫做四心啊，就变成叫做有情，叫无同无异。它跟虚空不同，因为我们所感知的虚空，它无觉知的能力。可是我们的心虽然是空无，可是它是什么？它不是同的，那它当然也不是异，因为它无相啊。
So, based on the objects that is being perceived, the individual object is perceived. In contrast, there's this uniformity of space. These are all phenomena that is perceived by the mind. And from that, we can further know that the thing that is doing the seeing, perceiving, illuminating, we call those sentient beings. Sentient beings is conscious that it can differentiate between what is uniform and what is distinct. And the object that is being perceived by the sentient beings is considered object. Sentient beings is conscious, has a conscious mind, and we also need to make a distinction of that with the space, the uniform space. The conscious mind has the ability to be aware, whereas the empty space does not have the function, the ability to be aware. So based on these succession of logic, the mind is not the same as the phenomenon, the uniform and distinct phenomenon. The mind is not the same as the empty space either, because it can be aware, and the true mind itself does not exhibit any particular form.
所以这边大概就是这个总结就是什么？有对象的知啊，本来是我们的心性一直是没有对象、没有能所的知，那现在就是变成我们是有对象的知啊。我们现在就是总是会有对象的啊，像我在讲，你们在听嘛，这都是有对象的啊。那这个部分有对象的知叫做识啊，那没有对象的知就是心性，就是智慧啊。我们叫转识成智，就是转有对象的变成没对象。我们修行就是转有对象变成没有对象，我们叫做入流往守。
So in summary, the mind is originally without duality of subject and object. And in that kind of state, we call that wisdom. In contrast, the way we're using the true mind right now is we think that there's a subject and object, and we perceive and illuminate things based on that deluded thinking. And another word that is often used is with the subjective and objective mind is called consciousness. So the goal of our practice, the kind of understanding we're aiming to achieve, is to transform consciousness into wisdom. Another way to put it is that we are trying to eliminate subjectivity and objectivity when we perceive the phenomenon. There's no longer this dualistic thinking, transforming the conscious into wisdom.
所以在这边呢，其实从这边讲到这边的时候，后面可能下次再讲了哈。从这边来讲，就是什么？就是收了重点。我们流浪生死，就是没能守了，可是我们一直会有能守。那我们也一直想办法让自己什么维持有能守的。我们自己选择有能守，因为不知道，其实你心里是没有能守的。那这一个，我想不懂的人，我们都设法让自己有能守，因为有能守表示你活着。
And so over here, a quick summary of that is that the reason why we are wandering aimlessly in the cycles of birth and death is because we, even though our true mind does not exhibit subjectivity and objectivity, it's non-dualistic. But the way we're using this true mind is diluted, and we are operating with the sense of subject and object. Furthermore, we continue to choose to operate that way, either because we don't know that it's non-dualistic mind is possible, or that we keep hanging on to this way of subjectivity and objectivity as a way to anchor ourselves, to convince us, to serve as evidence to prove that we are indeed alive. So we're grasping onto duality to prove our own existence. That is the reason why we are still wandering in the cycle of birth and death.
所以在这边就是说，我们在修行的时候，有时候我们叫什么修波罗蜜也好，或者说什么，像那个灵济禅师，他去一个地方，然后那个这个是引他就说你要先礼佛还是先礼祖师？他两个都是不理，因为什么？就能理、守理、性空寂，这个我常常讲的啊，你能理的心，还有守理的对象，都是你的空寂的心。
So when we're practicing, whether it's practicing the paramitas or not, the attitude we should have, we can use the story of Patriarch Ling Ji as a guidance. The story went with Master Ling Ji went to pay respect and ask for teaching from another master, and the reception monk then asked, upon Ling Ji's arrival, asked him, are you going to first pay respect to the Buddha, prostrate to the Buddha, or are you going to first prostrate to the patriarch? And Master Ling Ji said, neither. And the reason why he said neither is the one that can do the prostrating and the object that is receiving my prostration neither exist. The mind has always been empty and quiet. There's no subjectivity and objectivity in the mind. So he answered, I'm neither going to prostrate to the Buddha and the patriarch. So that is what we're aiming to achieve.
所以我们在修波罗蜜的时候，比如说布施啊，还是忍辱啊，都是没有能布施的我所布施的对象，或者说没有能耐的我，没有什么没有所折磨我的对象，因为什么？因为全部都是你明的。
So bring that attitude, that understanding to our own practice. Let's use the 6 paramitas as an example. The first of the paramita of giving, and the third is paramita of tolerating insults. Ultimately, there's really no subject and object in any of these practices. There's no subject of giving. There's no object of receiving my donation. Or when it comes to tolerance, there isn't anyone that is dishing out the insult to me, nor is there a person, me, that is at the receiving end of the insult. Because these are all phenomenon. The object and subject are all phenomenon that is that my mind perceives, illuminates.
所以大概就是说，我们每个当下大概就是什么，就是两者能听跟所听是你，这是第一个啊。但是我们会觉得是，我们会把所听的声音当成人先不管了啊。那第二个啊，能听的时候所听已经不见了，但是我们觉得所听的还在，所以大概这两个变成我们都是，就是跟这个错误相违背啊，所以在运作我们的心，我们叫做众生用啊。
So at all times, we make two levels of mistakes. The first one is there is a subject that is listening. There's an object that is being heard. Whereas the subject and object in this operation has always been your true mind. But we don't see that. We keep thinking that what is being heard is other. It belongs to other. So there's this notion of self and other that gives rise as a result of subjectivity and objectivity. That is the first level of mistake. The second mistake that we make is that out of this subject and object, instead of understanding it as the first thought and the second thought, we do not know that when the second thought arises, the first thought has already perished. We keep thinking that it's still there. It persists on, further confirming this delusion. There's this subject and object. But the first thought actually has vanished as soon as the second thought manifests. So those are the mistakes that we make. And that's what's leading us to use our Buddha nature, our true mind, and we use it to perform the functions of sentient beings.
所以到最后大家应该做一个总结哈，大概就是说，一个全部都是我名的，也就是说，这个梦境全部都是我啊，不管是张三李四都是我，张三李四路人甲、路人乙，什么导演，还有你的背景全部都是我。然后第二个就是什么？我去碰触 A， 那我这一个是什么？是碰触不到的，因为我碰触 A 的时候 ，A 就是我。那当我回来的时候，然后我那个 A 就变成我。假设 A 是被我名的，那第二念的话，那个 A 就变成我自己，所以它碰不到。大概这两个，一个就是我们叫后念碰不到前念啊，或是法不相知，一个是都是我名的。
So, in conclusion, we need to understand the erroneous way that we are using our mind. The first understanding we should now try to cultivate and to deepen is that all phenomenon are illuminated by my mind. They are, so when we're dreaming, everything that's happening in the dream is me. All the actors, doesn't matter who that is, person A and person B, all the actors are me. The director is me. All of them are me. So that is a first understanding that we can try to practice. And the second one is that the relationship between second thought and the first thought. The second thought can never come in contact with the first thought. So thought after thought, or we can call it Dharma and Dharma, they cannot come into contact with each other. They cannot know each other because the second one, once it arises, the first one has already perished. So you can never contact the object or your prior thought. So these are two understandings that we can try to practice and contemplate.
好，我们今天就这样讲没有，接下来就让大家就是 Q&A 哈。
That's where I'll end my talk today, and now we'll open up for Q&A.
Now it's Q&A, so if anyone have questions, just raise your hand. Yeah. 好，看到先是晴菩萨，然后是 Angela 菩萨，然后是 Harry Miller 大家每人一个问题，谢谢。
早安法师，谢谢您的说明，还有谢谢 translate。那个我对你那个讲这个性觉妙明那几句话呢的每一句终于就听懂了，经过多次的，但是我的问题是我只有这句话我还是没有办法想清楚，就是无明又非决战明性，可不可以请您再说一下？谢谢。
就是其实无明就是我们可以讲说它是没有明，没有对象的明，可是我们的觉瞻明性是有明的功能，这是第一个。那无明一般我们来讲无明是有能所的明，就是说有能所的明基本上就是四心。那我们的觉瞻明性它是永远没有能所的，所以它不是，就如果是两个啦，就是它没办法明所以不是能够明的觉瞻明那个觉性。那另外它是有能所的，可是我们这个什么，我们这个觉瞻明性是无能所的明。大概这两个，所以它不是，这样可以懂吗？好，那个谁要不要翻译？
好，我试试看。The person in the audience thanked Fashi for explaining the verses, and she has finally been able to understand the phrase that says, the nature of awareness has this wondrous ability to illuminate, but she then first sought clarification for the second part where non-illuminating is not it, and our true nature has the ability to illuminate. What does that mean exactly? And Fashi's answer is that basically boils down to that the object that is illuminated by our true mind, it itself cannot illuminate because it's a phenomenon, it's an object. And the second one is that the true mind, there's no subjectivity and objectivity in the function of the true mind. 好了，法师。
好，那应该可以了吧？好，那应该第二个吧？
对，下一位 Angela 菩萨。
法师，您听到我说话吗？
听到了，
我可以听到。
阿弥陀佛。我的问题就是说，因为好像我现在的状况就是有一个能所的这个经验嘛，体验。那如果我现在用，就是还没跳出，就是可能说超越，还是跳出能所二元对立的体验。那如果我用这种心来听法，还是有一个能所，所以我的问题就是这样子听下去，是不是没有出路，还是怎么样跳出去啊？
没有，这是我对，好，你用有能所的心，那听懂了没有能所的觉性，然后就学习怎么样跳开没有能所。你一定用什么？等于是我们用有能所的语言，然后学习到怎么样跳开没有能所的，叫我们进入不可思议的境界。所以你还是要借助语言，没有问题的。
The question from the audience, from Angela, goes that, Fashi, you're explaining non-dualistic mind, yet my current experience, I am still constantly experiencing there's a subject and object. I cannot jump out of this loop. So I'm listening to you, attending the talk with subject and object mind. So where would this lead me? There's no end to this loop. And this Fashi's answer is that true, that we are still using a dualistic mind with subject and object to listen to the talk. And we're using this mind, dualistic mind, to try to understand the concept of non-duality. There's no problem to this because we do have to use a dualistic language as a tool to try to learn and practice, to try to glimpse at this concept of non-duality. So continue to listen on and continue to practice this way. It's okay for now.
好的，谢谢法师。好，下一位，next is Harry Miller. I don't know if we have. Yeah, go ahead. We'll see if we have time to take on more questions. But Harry, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Guo Xing Faster. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Very quickly. So you're talking about first thought and succeeding thought, and that we, when we're in the state of illusion, we hold on to the first one, and when it's really disappeared. And but isn't it the case? This is really talking about attachment. But in awareness, if there weren't a first and a second thought or succeeding things, we could never remember anything. We wouldn't be able to learn Dharma if things simply disappeared out of mind and there was no mindful way of holding on to it. That's my question.
老师，我先翻一下 Harry
对。
Harry 菩萨 let me know if the translation is adequate. No, your question was in English. Okay. 所以法师您的问题是说这个前念跟后念的关系。那问题的所在是在于我们后念一直认为前念还在。那可是我们如果把前念都放掉了，真实的体验到它不在的话，那我们就无从记忆东西记不住，我们也没有办法学习佛法。那这个要怎么解释？ Is that correct, Harry?
Yes, yeah. I mean,
没有真正的你的记忆是没有能所的，永远没有能所才能够。我们有一个人。像佛陀有没有一刹那间无量劫，还有我们有一个人，我们有一个人就是什么濒死，那14年一刹那就全部抛开。那我们看到张三，你一刹那你的所有的记忆都浮出来，其实是没有能所才能够记住能所。
Okay. So in reality, the answer to your question, Harry, is that the memory, there's no subject and object in memory. For instance, the Buddha is able to know all in one instant from everything that happened in the countless kalpas. And similarly with people near-death experience, or we can even bring it down to everyday situation when you see a person, instantaneously everything you know about that person manifests in front of you. So that can be done because the true mind is without subject and object, and so is memory.
谢谢。
好，还有最后一个的。
Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is that when I see an object, when I see a phenomena, it doesn't have awareness. It cannot perceive. So I just can conclude that there is a mind that is aware because that object doesn't have awareness. It can't be aware. So I come to conclusion that I have a mind that is aware. So my mind cannot be an object. For example, my body cannot be my mind because it doesn't have awareness. For example, you said my eyes can see, my mind can see, the eyes can see, the ears cannot hear. So the objects are not my mind. But I am confused when you say that everything is our mind. There is no subject and object. So if these are not my mind, and because they don't have awareness, so when you say that there is no subject and object and everything is our mind, I cannot understand this. So how can everything be my mind? These don't have awareness. I can't understand.
好，翻译一下吧。
好，Masan，法师，我先跟他弄清楚一下。So Masan, your question is, to you, the mind can aware, so it's not an object. So because you can differentiate between object which cannot be aware and your mind that can aware, therefore you don't understand why is that your everything is in the mind. Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay, let me give it a try. 所以法师他问题是说，是相的话没有见闻觉知的功能，心有见闻觉知的功能，因为心有见闻觉知的功能，所以它不是一个物质的东西，它不是一个相。那既然是这样的话，为什么一切都是在心里的？就是 everything is in the mind。
好，这个部分可能就要，好像上次蛮有讲的样子，就是我们的能知的心跟所知的物譬如说我所知的电脑或者所知的一个人像都可以那能知的心不是物，可是能知的心跟物没办法分说哪一个是物，哪一个是心就是每个当下，有时候用叫做海水跟波浪你每个当下看到一个东西，比如说看到电脑你没办法分说哪一个是电脑，哪一个是心，它是同时既是电脑也是心。
Okay, I think we have talked about this last time, but let me try to explain. So there's this, what it is that can know is the mind, and the phenomenon that is being perceived are considered object. And let's use whether it's a person as an example or the computer in front of you. Those are object that is being perceived by the mind. Now, the mind is not object. That's first level of understanding. The second level is at the same time, the mind cannot be differentiated, cannot be teased apart from the object. It cannot be teased apart. So this can be illustrated using the analogy of the ocean and the waves. They are not separate. So when you see the computer in front of you, it's hard to tease apart which part is your mind and which part is your subject. They simultaneously exist together.
所以这个开悟的人其实没有物，全部都是心。
So people who have become enlightened, there are no phenomenon, no object. Everything is their mind.
那我们会觉得有物是什么？是说它已经消失，已经不存在，你觉得它还存在，叫做物所以对那些人，他们像就是说，他们叫做用念力把汤匙把它折断，是因为汤匙本身就是心，并不是物。
So the reason why we feel they're objects is because we mistaken the thought that has perished as still existing, and the actually perished, but we mistakenly think persisted thought, we see that as object. And that is the reason behind how people with quote unquote supernatural power, they're able to bend a spoon with their mind. They're actually not bending the spoon with their mind because the spoon is their mind.
这样可以吗？
Does this work for you? Is this okay? Is this answer okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
好，应该
好。法师，还有最后一位菩萨有一个问题是 post 在 line 上，post 在 chat room，他是说，是实相者则是非相，是故如来说明实相，离一切诸相则名诸佛，是这个意思吗？我也不知道他什么意思。如果看菩萨，你可以也可以讲。
他是要了解，他只是注解吗？还是他的问题？
我也不太清楚。开菩萨，您可以直接问，您这个 quote 是这个意思吗？是什么意思？
我是可以解释的，他是不是有问题，还是他要来回应我的问题？他
的问题比较简短，我来看一下啊。是实相者即是非相， 离一切诸相，即名诸佛，是这个意思吗？他的问题。
没有，他可能是什么？就是他要什么解释的，早要解释的嘛。
It's a question of what he explaining earlier.
我不晓得，他是不是问题哦？如果是问题，我就可以回答嘛。
他说是个问题。
我也可以讲一下的哈，我稍微讲一下哈。所谓实相者啊，就是我们的心性，实际上实相就是我们的心性。我现在正在讲话这个心性，它就是实相，可它是没有相的。那离一切相就是诸我，你如果离开有能所的相，那你就是什么？你就是佛。我们的佛性就是什么？我们的佛或者佛性都是这个心嘛，我们叫心佛众生三无差别。
So I guess it's a question. So let me briefly talk about this. So over here, there's this verse that says the true phenomenon, the true phenomenon is there's no phenomenon. And that is why even though and yet the Buddha call it phenomenon. Actually, departing from all phenomenon is called Buddhas. That's the verse roughly translated. So Fashi's response to that verse is that the so-called true phenomenon is this mind that we are using right now to do everything, to do the listening, our true mind. The true mind does not exhibit any particular form, or it's not in the form of any phenomenon. And the Buddha nature, or to become enlightened like the Buddha, is to depart from all dualistic phenomenon that it has subject and object. So again, departing from all dualistic phenomenon is the Buddha. And that is why this verse can then be related to this often heard phrase, the mind, the Buddha, and all sentient beings are all same and one. There's no difference between the three. 法师好了。
好，嗨，
好，感恩